One morning, I stepped outside and realized something impossible had happened overnight, because my entire backyard was slowly filling with clear ocean water, as if a small sea had appeared where grass used to be. Water kept spreading across the yard in gentle waves, turning the peaceful garden into something that looked more like the edge of a coastline than the backyard of a normal house. As the pools expanded and sunlight reflected across the growing water surface, I realized this might actually be the perfect place to try something completely insane. If Pokémon suddenly existed in real life, I wanted to see what would happen if I raised every water-type Pokémon in one single habitat. That meant transforming my backyard into a massive aquatic environment capable of supporting dozens of different water creatures. Pumps began filling artificial ponds, while pipes pushed water through a network of filters designed to keep the ecosystem stable. The entire area slowly turned into a complex system of shallow ponds, deep pools, and flowing water channels. Sunlight reflected off the surface of the main pond as the last section of the habitat finished filling with crystal clear water. Gentle ripples spread across the pond, creating the calm moment right before the first Pokémon appeared. When I stepped back and looked at the entire yard, it had already become something unbelievable, a complete water Pokémon sanctuary. The very first Pokémon to arrive was a small Squirtle walking confidently toward the pond. Without hesitation, Squirtle jumped into the water and created a splash that officially began the experiment. Squirtle immediately started swimming through the pond, exploring every corner of its new habitat. Only minutes later, several Magikarp appeared and began splashing wildly in every direction. The peaceful pond instantly turned chaotic as Magikarp continued their endless flopping and splashing. Then a Mudkip appeared at the edge of the pond and quietly slipped underwater. Instead of swimming around, Mudkip started digging tunnels beneath the muddy bottom. Clouds of sediment spread through the water as the tunnel network expanded. Slowly, the water level started changing as the tunnels redirected the underground flow. The backyard soil became wet and swampy as water seeped through the new channels. At that exact moment, a confused Psyduck wandered toward the pond. Psyduck stood near the water, staring blankly, as if trying to understand what was happening. Eventually, Psyduck stepped into the pond and continued staring at the sky. By this point, the habitat was already full of movement as multiple Pokémon explored the water. Suddenly, the deep pool began to ripple in a way that looked very different from normal waves. The ripples quickly grew larger as something massive moved beneath the surface. Without warning, a gigantic Gyarados erupted from the water like a sea monster. Gyarados twisted its enormous body through the pool and sent huge waves crashing outward. Water splashed over the edges of the habitat as the giant Pokémon continued moving. The pool struggled to contain the powerful movement created by Gyarados. Meanwhile, a Vaporeon quietly approached the pond. Vaporeon stepped into the water and instantly dissolved into the liquid surface. Only a moment later, the same Vaporeon reappeared somewhere else in the pond. It continued vanishing and reappearing as if the water itself had become a portal. Squirtle swam rapidly through the waves created by the giant Pokémon. Magikarp kept jumping wildly across the surface of the pond. Mudkip's tunnel system started redirecting water currents beneath the habitat. The entire aquatic environment was now moving with constant energy. Waves repeatedly crashed against the sides of the ponds and pools. Gyarados continued circling the deepest section like a massive aquatic predator. Magikarp splashed everywhere as water droplets flew through the air. The sunlight turned those droplets into sparkling reflections above the pond. The entire backyard habitat shook with the motion of the water. One enormous splash sent a wave across nearly the entire ecosystem. Eventually, Squirtle began swimming calmly near the shallow edge again. Groups of Magikarp gradually gathered together in deeper water. Mudkip's tunnel system stabilized the flow of water through the pond. Underground currents began circulating the ecosystem naturally. the chaotic habitat slowly transformed into a balanced aquatic system. Suddenly, Squirtle began to glow as evolution energy surrounded it. The bright light reflected across the water while the transformation continued. When the light disappeared, Squirtle had evolved into Blastoise. The newly evolved Blastoise stood powerfully beside the pond. Blastoise fired a massive stream of water from its cannons. The powerful water jets redirected excess water back into the pools. The waves gradually calmed as Blastoise regulated the water pressure. The habitat finally stabilized for the first time since the experiment began. Magikarp began swimming peacefully instead of splashing chaotically. Sunlight reflected gently across the calm pond's surface. Mudkip rested beside one of its underwater tunnels. The clear water now reflected the sky like a natural lake. Beneath the surface, multiple Pokémon swam peacefully together. The backyard had become a complete water Pokémon sanctuary, where dozens of creatures now lived together in perfect balance. As the sun started setting, the habitat looked almost perfectly balanced, but the ocean tank was still empty. Slowly, the massive saltwater tank began filling with deep blue water. Powerful filtration systems activated to simulate ocean conditions. Moments later, a graceful Lapras appeared inside the tank. Lapras glided peacefully through the glowing blue water. Sunlight filtered through the tank, creating beams of light underwater. Then, a massive shadow moved beneath Lapras. The water level slowly rose as something enormous approached the surface. A gigantic Wailord erupted from the depths of the tank. Its enormous size made the entire habitat look tiny. Waves slammed against the tank walls as Wailord moved. Lapras continued swimming calmly beside the giant Pokémon. The ocean habitat now contained creatures of incredible scale. Water began splashing near the tank edges from the movement. The massive aquarium had officially become a miniature ocean. Dark storm clouds suddenly formed above the backyard. Heavy rain began pouring across the entire habitat. The ponds overflowed as water rushed across the flooded ground. Streams of water ran between pools and channels. Magikarp flopped across flooded grass during the storm. Rain splashed violently against the water surface. Gyarados thrashed through the storm waves in the deep pool. Huge waves surged across the flooded habitat. Blastoise stepped forward into the middle of the chaos. It fired powerful water cannons to redirect the excess water. Massive streams pushed water back into the pools. The waves gradually calmed as Blastoise regulated the water pressure. The habitat finally stabilized for the first time since the experiment began. Magikarp began swimming peacefully instead of splashing chaotically. Sunlight reflected gently across the calm pond's surface. Mudkip rested beside one of its underwater tunnels. The clear water now reflected the sky like a natural lake. Beneath the surface, multiple Pokémon swam peacefully together. The backyard had become a complete water Pokémon sanctuary, where dozens of creatures now lived together in perfect balance.